last 24, 48 have been interesting because you finally see Republicans who are like totally on board with deporting people who are, should not be deported. Totally on board with locking people up for their speech when it comes to Palestine. On board with taking women's rights away. Ooh, but the markets now that we have slapped tariffs on every country, these tariffs have gone absolutely buck wild. We have literally put tariffs on islands that have no people, penguins, seagulls, probably some really uppity crustaceans. That's who's getting slapped with tariffs. And none of it makes any sense. So I just wanted to put this out here because I had James Surowiecki on America Unhinged, my other show. And he's like, I figured out where these fake tariffs come from. They didn't calculate the tariff rates plus non-tariff barriers as they said they did. Instead, for every country, they just took our trade deficit with that country and divided it by the country's exports to us. So we have a $17.9 billion trade deficit with Indonesia. Its exports to us are $28 billion. 17.9 divided by 28 is 64%, which Trump claims is the tariff rate Indonesia charges us. What extraordinary nonsense this is. And so there's just some random math that's happening right now. And even like otherwise Republicans, Jim Cramer from whatever the hell, right? Money, Mad Money. Even he's like, this is bad. The math ain't mathin'. I don't know, Doug. What do you see any sense in this or like I don't know, wherever you want to start with this, start with
it. Well, it is completely nonsensical, and I spent a lot of time studying this stuff, and people who are not, adepts in this stuff look at it and think it's crazy. But, even if you spend a lot of time studying this stuff, it's crazy. There's just no other way about it. It makes no sense at all, either the way they structured the tariffs or the whole logic behind them. It's funny you mentioned Cramer, though. He did have this clip back during the financial crisis on CNBC where he revealed that he was once a member of the Spartacus League in his youth. So he does...
Oh my! Doesn't that check out though?
He was quoting Lenin and all kinds of things. It was a pretty wild clip. So there's always that. This Kramer's going back to his roots. But yeah, it just makes no sense at all. You can say that tariffs make sense as an economic development policy, especially if you're a poor country trying to industrialize, and you need to keep out imports that could undermine your efforts at industrialization. The United States does not qualify as that. So it's just, I think it's Trump's own personality. He's got just full of resentments. He's been obsessed with this sort of thing for decades. And he also likes the grand gesture. It's just like, I am the king. I am imposing tariffs. It's just of a piece with everything else about him. He just likes to be the boss. He's got this crazy idea too, that foreign countries pay the tariffs, not American consumers. And no one actually outside his inner circle actually believes that. And also, he did say in that speech when he was introducing the tariffs the other day, that back in the old days, we had other countries paying for the U.S. government. Back when the U.S. was largely financed, or the federal government was largely financed by tariffs in the 19th and early 20th centuries. I don't even understand why foreign countries should be paying for our government. That's our business. But I guess it fits for a guy who doesn't like paying his bills to have somebody else pick up the tab for the government. But, it's just everything about this is completely nonsensical and destructive. Yeah. And, you're absolutely right that people have put up with an awful lot of other horrors and foolishness coming from this administration. But this really is going to affect everyone in a very material way. And it's funny, this is the guy that won the election in part because of the inflation during the Biden years. And here he is. He's going to raise the price of almost everything, sometimes very dramatically. And the formula is completely insane, too. Like Cambodia, for example. I think it's going to have like a 97% tariff rate or something like that. And the reason is that Cambodia is a very poor country that exports a lot of garments to us and doesn't really import much from the United States.
Right.
So it makes no sense. And this is a very poor country, and it's going to be very disruptive to those countries. There's like, China is able to handle this kind of blockage of its exports. But for really poor countries like Cambodia, it's going to be a real shock.
Yeah, that's what I wanted. I mean, so I want to play obviously a few clips of how Republicans are freaking out about this / trying to sell it. You know, but it is important to understand, you know, like you've been in, you know, as a, you know, an economist who's on the left or, you know, writing about this for a long time. And, you know, I've been you know, an activist since, you know, the early 2000s or the late 90s when we were talking about, you know, the global justice movement and trying to make sure that we don't ship all of our jobs abroad where there are no labor laws and environmental protections and on and on and on. And, you know, whatever it is, 30 years later, and you're like, you can't put the, you know, globalized economy back in the bag overnight when you've spent decades making a tons of money, you know, international corporations making so much money off the cheap labor of places like Cambodia and on and on and on. And it's like, now all of a sudden we're the victim and Cambodia is the aggressor. Like, what gives? No, this has always been about a consumerist economy, and capital going where it pleases in order to get the cheapest labor with the fewest regulations, with the fewest environmental laws, and on and on and on. And so it is just this like, it's like someone dropped someone, I don't know, it's just like someone dropped a Seattle, you know, protester on their head, like from 1999, like, I'm president now, and we're going to reverse it all. It's just like, there are other ways. I don't even know what he wants out of this. I think that's the other thing. It's like, I don't even understand. I don't think he understands what he wants out of this.
Well, he wants to be 1955 again, when white men ruled the world, and you know there were big steel mills in the Midwest, and everybody behaved, and you know women were not so troublesome, and black people were not so troublesome. He just wants it to be, you know, that the world that, you know, of course, was heavily imagined, but the world that he imagines 1955 was. He wants to bring that back as much as possible. His capacity for feeling wounded and exploited, you know, for this guy, president of the United States, the most powerful person in the world, he's like, I don't know, number 700 or something in the billionaires list, but he's still a billionaire. The capacity for him to feel that he'd loves to say, been treated very unfairly. He just, one of his favorite phrases, like his capacity for feeling discriminated against and marginalized is just a remarkable thing. You know, I think the biggest wound he's ever experienced in his life is that he's from Queens and the swells of Manhattan never took him seriously enough. And he's managed to transform his resentment over that to something that the masses can identify with, or at least some of the masses can identify with. I got to hand it to him. He's got some political skills and he's able to pull this off, but he's just such a repulsive personality. And now we all have to live in his world.
And we've got a lot of people sort of running cover, but we also have people who are not running cover for him. This is Howard Lutnick, Commerce Secretary. He's
one of the dumber members of the administration, it seems.
I mean, this guy has been all hands on deck trying to sell these tariffs to everybody. And he's also, last we heard him, was like, you know, everybody needs to sell, to buy Tesla stock. That's what we got to do to help our dear friend Elon. So here's Lutnick, and it's so ironic because it's basically, he sounds like a global justice protester back in like the early 2000s.
Now, we're not going to have all factories come back, like clothing manufacturing. That's tough to bring back. But what kind of manufacturing are you talking about returning here?
Well, you can't just give that away. See, what's going to happen is robotics are going to replace the cheap labor that we've seen all across the world. I mean, think of what our factories did. They went to the cheapest labor in the whole world, slave labor, cheap labor, the worst environmental conditions, polluting the heck out of it. And then we bring back those cheap products here and we feel good about ourselves because we don't see the pain. But
now we're not going to
have... what is this? Like, what is this? Oh, we don't see the pay. What is he like? This like anti-capitalist? Like suddenly, you know, everyone's just seeing that there's cheap labor, there's slave labor. It's like, yes, you and your buddies have made billions of this and decimated the U.S. labor market. But yeah,
it's interesting. He said though that it's not going to be jobs. I mean, they're promising jobs out of this, but it's going to be robots. And that's, we talk a lot about shipping jobs, manufacturing jobs in particular abroad, but a lot of it is automation. And it's not, even China's losing manufacturing employment. And it's not like we're going to get mass employment in the old style industries. It's funny, we had under Biden, there were a lot of problems with the Inflation Reduction Act and the CHIPS Act and all this, but it was actually a coherent attempt to create and develop new industries, like clean industries. And there are a lot of things wrong. I could talk about them if you want, but there are a lot of things wrong with the Biden package. But at least it was something, an effort to move in the right direction. This is like, it's got to do tariffs without an industrial policy or any kind of planning involved. It's just absolutely empty and destructive.
Yeah, and there does, like, I can't imagine what business is thinking. Like, what if, like, what are you going to do? Are you going to suddenly build a plant overnight?
I don't normally find myself sympathetic with big executives, but it'd be really hard to do that job right now when you don't know what the policy is going to be in a week. Because, Trump talks about these policies being permanent. Who knows? The guy changes his mind on a whim. So if you're a Ford executive, for example, trying to plan the production of automobiles in North America, what do? You just don't know. Like, your whole business model has been upended. It might not be a just business model, but it's something that made sense over the last couple of decades. And now it doesn't make sense anymore. And what are you going to do? But are you going to make investments on the assumption that this is going to be the policy for an indefinite period? It takes a long time to build a factory. It's not like they can just flip a switch and start making cars in Ohio. It's going to take time to do these things. And there's going to be an awful lot of painful adjustment to get there. And it's just remarkable. And, if you want to rejigger the world trading system, you negotiate with your trading partners. You don't just act with this big stick. I think Trump also believes the United States is far more powerful in the world now than it's like, again, 1955, when the United States was the unchallenged economic and political and military power in the world. That's just not the case anymore. And so we're driving all these other countries together. So we had China, Japan, and South Korea, countries that don't normally get along all that well, agreeing to a joint response on the auto tariffs the other week. He's a uniter, I guess. He's uniting the rest of the world, even as he's dividing
against us.
Against us,
effectively cutting us out of any kind of deals. I mean, again, you can't. There are ways to stimulate, national production, and it does make more sense. I agree with you on, and I'm sure it can dig a lot deeper into it, but on the limitations of the Inflation Reduction Act. But you begin to see, if you wanted to bring national industry back, what areas would you do that in? It's not, even coal miners know the future isn't coal. Even a lot of people who do like manufacturing know that the future is in automation and has been, and that is, a bigger displacing factor than so-called undocumented people taking their jobs, which they are not. But, and you've got people like Rand Paul, who are kind of blowing the whistle on all this and saying that, the ways that Trump is kind of actioning these tariffs, which is under the International Emergency Economic Powers Act. Speaking of, we're constantly in a war. We're doing this because we're in wartime. Here's Rand Paul on the floor saying there is no precedent for that. That's not, you can't just use that. And tariffs are a tax.
Feeble-minded to do it ourselves. But the thing is, the Constitution doesn't let us give our power away. There's something called the non-delegation clause, and it says that we're not allowed to give power away. We can't just say, here, Mr. President, take it. In this particular case, it's even worse. The rule of law, the IEPA is the acronym for it, has never been used for tariffs before and doesn't mention the word tariff. So this isn't something that was targeted in times of need. The president can have the power to put on tariffs. Never says that. This will be an extraordinary use of something never intended to be a way to have unilateral, one single person invoke a tax on the people. With regard to tariffs, let's be very clear. Tariffs are simply taxes. Tariffs don't punish foreign governments. They punish American families. When we tax imports, we raise the price of everything, from groceries to smartphones to washing machines to prescription drugs. Every dollar collected in tariff revenue comes straight out of the pockets of American consumers.
Oh, Rand Paul, twice a year, he's right. You know, it's like
I was just saying, Trump is uniter. He's getting me to agree with Rand Paul, which is a very strange sensation, but it's true. Everything he said is true.
And the other thing that he said, and this is Salon's got this piece out, but basically that, you know, that Rand Paul also told reporters that William McKinley, who's also put tariffs that Trump is obsessed with in 1890, they lost 50% of their seats the next election. McKinley.
That was only a month later, too. The tariffs were imposed in October 1890. The November 1890 election, the Republicans are creamed. And then he tried it again when he was president a decade later. He ended up getting shot. So who knows what that means?
Right. Shot by an anarchist, I just learned.
Yes.
You know, maybe history
with an
doesn't.
unpronounceable name, Shajglager. I can't say his name.
So they're warning, they're freaking out about this, and that's not all. You've got, you know, classic bootlickers. Let me find him. Where did he go? Classic bootlickers like Ted Cruz. Here he is. He's trying to sort of make it look like, oh no, oops, it's not going to be permanent. You know, this is just a it's going to go away at some point, right? This is Cruz wishful thinking.
Look, I think it is a mistake to assume that we will have high tariffs in perpetuity. I don't think that would be good economic policy. I am not a fan of tariffs. And the announcement yesterday, look, time is going to tell in the next month or two or three what happens. If the result of yesterday's announcement is a lot of our trading partners across the globe dramatically reduce the tariffs they charge on U.S. goods and services, and the consequence of that is the U.S. government dramatically cuts the tariffs that were announced yesterday, that would be a great outcome. That would be good for America. If the result is our trading partners jack up their tariffs and we have high tariffs everywhere, I think that is a bad outcome for America. Tariffs are a tax on consumers, and I'm not a fan of jacking up taxes on American consumers. So my hope is these tariffs are short-lived and they serve as leverage to lower tariffs across the globe.
Are they going to do that, Doug? What do you think?
Well, they haven't already. I mean, Canada's already matched the tariffs on cars, and China, I believe, is already matching tariffs. And
they were supposed to lower them, but they're lower them.
You know, but negotiate with people. You know, like, or use the tariffs in some kind of surgical way, or if you like, those euphemisms they like to use about war. But this kind of battering ram approach is only going to annoy people and drive the rest of the world together in union against the United States. It's quite impressive, though, what he's done. He's done more to undermine the entire post-World War II order, the whole imperial order, political order, economic order, in a matter of weeks. It's not a small achievement. And turning Canada into our enemy. I mean, how do you do that? You know, we've had good relations with Canada. It's a good country. We like Canada. Why turn it into some kind of demonized enemy?
Absolutely. And then being like, no, you're mine. I mean, we are just like, it's like we're doing pickup artistry on Canada. Like,
it was remarkable to watch the Prime Minister, Mark Carney, talking the other day. And he's a former central banker. He's not my kind of guy in class terms, but the guy is sophisticated and thinks about what he's doing. And he's talking about how Canada is going to respond with a serious industrial policy to develop its own independent manufacturing. And there's some thought going on there. That nobody in the Trump administration is capable of that level of thought. I mean, literally nobody. And then, I see Stephen Miller, they're just one of the vilest people on earth, saying, we inherited an economy from Biden that was in collapse. I have no idea what he was talking about. It was most definitely not in collapse. It had structural problems, it was, as it always does, but it was just fine.
I mean, you could, right. We have critiques of, I think the high interest rates, the not going after corporate price gouging during the pandemic, but the fact that we were able to bounce back from the pandemic, thanks in part to the American Rescue Plan, job growth numbers were steady. And, and now you see, and I know the markets are not indicators for everything, but the markets are at their lowest they've been since March, April, May, June of 2020. During the global effing pandemic. It's like this man got a second bite at the apple, a second bite at fascism, and now he's like, ooh, let me do a self-pandemic again and destroy the economy. It's wild. What's going on, Frantifa? If you haven't already, subscribe to this channel right now. Hit that button. And also, you can become a patron and support the show every single week. Get access to bonus episodes and exclusive merchandise. Patreon.com/bitchuationroom. Do